Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Fateless podcast episode. And joining me from the Fateless team is going to be Yuho and Mike, and a new addition for first time here on the channel in Aaron. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself and let you know a little, or let everybody know about your backstory and what you do here at Fateless?
Sure. My name is Aaron De Orive. I am the narrative director who was brought on to Fateless to look at this amazing game, Godforge. I was approached by Sham, who started telling me about the game. And the moment he said, "Oh, it's about all these mythological figures all coming together in this space, and battling each other and having all these conflicts," I said, "Wait, what? Mythology? I'm in." So that was the immediate hook for me. I loved mythology since I was a wee tot. I remember checking out the Bullfinch's mythology right from my library, a school library, and reading through all the Greek myths. But oddly, I liked the Norse myths a lot more. And that was like tiny section at the back of it, right? And so I was like, no, I'm going to read more about the Norse myths. But yeah, I've loved it my entire life, and it was a project I just could not turn down. My history is I had gone to school to university to study film production, and it was odd because so I was a double major. I was doing creative writing, and then I decided to add film production, and and I had an emphasis on film and screenwriting, and at the same time doing a series of short stories for my thesis. And Yeah, just fell in love with storytelling. Who of us doesn't have that story of a movie or something that you saw when you were a kid and it captured your imagination? For me, it was a lot of early horror, the wonderful Universal horror movies, and then eventually Hammer horror. I'm still a horror hound. I love horror of all kinds, and I tend to write mostly supernatural thrillers and horror. But also, it was the wonderful animated stuff from Disney. I mean, particularly Fantasia. Fantasia had a huge influence on me, and all the wonderful sequences in there. But So when I graduated, I was determined to go to Los Angeles and, I don't know, be a lowly paid abused intern somewhere until somebody would notice me or read one of my scripts. But fate intervened, and I ended up applying for a lead writer position at Origin, the makers of the Ultima franchise. And I showed them they wanted a writing sample, obviously, and I said, "Well, here's my thesis screenplay that I wrote, and it was fantasy, and they read it and they liked it, and so I got the gig." And so that started a long career. I've been in games about 20 years, doing various things. I started with Ultima, and was working on Ultima Online 2. Um, that project was tragically canceled. That's another thing you're going to hear often with the video game. They get canceled. They can cancel all the time. So I went over to work for Funcom for a little while, and got to live in Oslo, Norway. Beautiful city, beautiful people, wonderful company, and eventually ended up coming back to US. And then I worked for a little while on the Metroid franchise, and eventually ended up being the lead writer for Star Wars Galaxies. Again, I was a Star Wars nerd. Of course, I'd seen Star Wars when I was a kid multiple times, and I was a fan. So that was a lot of fun, and hopped onto another Star Wars project. I was a senior writer on Star Wars: The Old Republic. For those of you who are fans of that, if you've played through the Bounty Hunter missions, I wrote a bunch of those. That's who I was assigned. Great stuff, fun stuff. But I've also worked on a variety of other franchises here and there, just sort of, jumping in, writing on stuff for a little while, and jumping back out. Most of my experience has been with MMOs. Most recently, I was uh, the senior narrative designer at New World, and they brought me in to sort of be the lore master. They knew that I was a big lore hound, and I loved world creation and world building and mythology and all those wonderful things that go with world building. So they brought me in and said, "Hey, we need a lore Bible," and they already had so much in place, some wonderful, wonderful stuff. For those of you who played New World, it's actually not that different from kind of what we're doing now at Godforge. It's the idea is it's an island that a bunch of different people from different time have come to the island and they're trapped there, and then they become immortal. And so this is how life has progressed on this island over a period of several thousand years, starting with the ancient Babylonians, Sumerians, and Egyptians who got there, to more recently the era of the 16th century conquistadors and things like that. But anyway, so I got in there and did their lore Bible and got everything together and started creating different factions and doing different things. And it was great. It was a wonderful experience. Fantastic team. I worked with some amazing people in my career. I've been very fortunate. Um, and so I ended up leaving New World and going over to be the narrative director for a short time with a company called Arctic 7. They were doing a really great game over there called Dawn of Fire, and got to work with that crew. um, that unfortunately did not work out. Again, project was canceled, and was doing consulting with various different companies. And that's when Sham reached out and told me about Godforge. And again, like I said, the mythological thread is there through the whole thing. And I was like, oh God, a chance to work on mythology. And this time it's the actual gods. So yeah, I couldn't resist, and I jumped in. And again, I'm incredibly fortunate. The team is amazing. It's fantastic. I work with some wonderful people. Mike, of course, Mike Berry being one of them. He's the cinematic director. He and I have been working very closely together on developing the story for Godforge, writing all the cutscenes, the scripts, figuring out the storyline for the first two big arcs, basically. Um, and then working with various companies to start producing those cutscenes. It's going great. It's going very well. You all saw the announcement trailer, which Mike worked on. It's beautiful. It does everything that an announced trailer should do. It's exciting. It's visually stunning. It gives you just enough information about the world to make people go, I want to know more. And so that's the goal. So now that we've given you that promise in the announcement trailer, we have to provide the narrative that matches such a great announcement trailer, and hopefully we will. I think we are. I think we are. We're bringing in some really great concepts, both from mythology and then original, because the idea is that these gods have their history, and that's a mythology that anybody can look up on Wikipedia or in a mythology book. So that's what happened to them. But now that they've all been brought together into the shared space, now they have a history starting from that moment. And that's basically what Godforge is about. When you join the game, it's not so much a mythology lesson. It's more, well, what are these gods doing now? We all know Thor from the myths, but what's this Thor like? We all know Zeus. We all know Hercules. We all know Athena. We all know Cyrus. We all know these other characters, but how have them interacting with each other? How have they changed? What's different? What alliances have formed? What hatreds have formed? What rivalries have formed? Who's fallen in love with who? I mean, it's a whole new world when you can combine all these amazing mythologies and see how they would react one with the other. So yeah, so that's sorry for the long rambling there, but that's my background.
No, it's great to have a writer or a narrative director on, because I can just, say let you cook and you're good for 5 minutes. So no, that's awesome. You've been on some. I did play New World, as I'm sure a lot of gamers did. So it's really cool to hear some of the projects you were on.
Yep. Yeah, that's I knew that I'm not a big PC gamer. Most of my gaming happens on console. So I knew going in that they had the goal of eventually taking this to console. And I thought, I think this will do really well on console. And I think it's doing pretty good. But yeah, it got, new life was breathed into the project when they brought it to consoles. And folks seem to be enjoying it. So that's great.
Cool. Great. Well, I know you were talking about the cinematic. Did you and Mike want to discuss anything? Now we've officially leaked the cinematic recently, as of about 10 days ago when this airs, at GDC, a fun party where they were leaking that on stage and everything, and then releasing the video. So, did you two want to give any behind the scenes type of insight and
Uh,
how the
the ci-
cinematic developed and all that?
the announced trailer is actually before my time. That was Mike working with Jerry. O'Flaherty, another fantastic, amazing person. I'm telling you, the Fateless has managed to acquire some really amazing top talent. And that's always a good sign for me. When people are attracted to a project and they attract good people, they tend to attract even more good people. So that's always a promising thing. But that was before my time. I mean, Mike did a fantastic job on that announced trailer. I think it's absolutely stunning and beautiful. But yeah, if Mike wants to address that, I mean,
Yeah, I
I just
mean,
watch it and go, it's great.
I think that's what's interesting though is I came on to the project for that, and I've been on here. We've talked about it a little bit. It's nice. This is the first time it's actually been out in the world. Um, but yeah, we were working on that, having an idea on what the story was, but we hadn't really planned any of the game narrative. There was the world guides were forming, and there was an idea on story, but that whole asset was really meant to, like, let's just take some of the interesting bits, let's take some of the lore and let's tease it. Let's, it's an announce trailer, so it's not like we want to roll out the entire story of the game. We just want people to start talking. We want to give you some things to look at. Like, there's stuff hidden in there. If you haven't, go back and watch that trailer carefully. There's some cool stuff in there. There's some references. And when we started working, like I said before, I came on to direct that video, and then before Christmas break, about 4 or 5 months ago, signed to stay on and continue working. And now we're looking at all the in-game and cutscenes and narrative stuff, and now that's with Aaron. Um, but it's interesting because we've the thing we do talk about is anything that's in that announced trailer will definitely be important and integrate into the story. Like, we're not just, it's not just like a fluff piece of like, oh, look how pretty and high fidelity this is, and oh, look, that character looks cool, she has nothing to do with the game, to worry about. But like, no, they're all important parts they're all going to be a core to the creation of this world, and you as a player, what your journey is. So that's one thing we were definitely aligned on as soon as it came on. But yeah, I hadn't worked with Aaron. I didn't know Aaron. We all know Jerry, another mutual acquaintance. That's how I came into Fateless originally. Um, but I think we had you come in and write some of the tutorial stuff. And the thing we were talking about the last time was how important the tone is. And I think what Aaron's been able to do really well is capture a tone that feels respectful to mythology and history, but also modern enough where it feels like approachable. Like, it feels, we talked about this the other day, when you're writing dialogue, it feels, it feels like something that I would want to experience. It feels like something that's being created today. It feels like there's some stakes, and it's so that part's coming along really well, because we didn't obviously do that for the announced trailer at all. Like, there's no dialogue in that thing. So yeah, it's been great to kind of look at that. I think when Aaron first came out, it was like he had a bunch of questions about. I was like, I don't know, man. I have the same questions. I don't know those answers. I don't know what that thing means, but we got to make it mean something now. Um, but it's been great, yeah, because I think, I think we'll get into this in a bit, but it's, the message that I kept getting with this coming onto this style of game, because the same way I worked on League of Legends, I worked on Valorant, I worked on Lineage and Ion, and like Guild Wars, like it, um, there the world I'm coming from, the lore wasn't a storytelling game, but the lore was a big part of it. Like, I think it was an expectation. Where Aaron's coming from, MMOs, I mean, that it is the story, and everything I was being told was, I think players in this genre, being like the RPG hero collector, like, they love story, they want story, but they don't always get it, because you could make the argument that it's not necessary. Like, it's not core to gameplay to like, you're not necessarily progressing through a story. Like, you're grinding and collecting and building, and but I think we always came in and I was like, dude, how do you do this without it having a really cool story behind it? Like, it's a lot of work to make a story feel like an important part of an experience, when you could technically remove it and the gameplay loop is the same. But I think that's what we've been spending all our time, is like, how do we make that loop make sense? Like, how do we had progression? We have all these really cool characters that are in here. Just like we did for the announced trailer, it's like, what's a cool, contrast to get in here? And when we talk about, well, you've never had Thor and Hercules in the same room before, that could be cool. You know what I mean? Like, that's the part that gets us excited. So, we've been working to make the story a meaningful part of the experience, and I think that's one of the things. As you know, our focus moves from the trailer to the in-game cutscene stuff, and then we'll continue on for all the stuff afterwards. But yeah, that's we're working to make sure that the story feels integrated and cool and modern, and builds on what we did with the trailer. But honestly, like I'm for the announcement that it was, and the brand that it established, and the quality that hopefully it established, super happy with the way that one came out. But I do think the in-game stuff is exciting to work on, because it's like you're actually getting to tell the story. You know, it's like a lot, so much of the marketing stuff that games do and that I've done is like teasing at a story, teasing at a bigger conflict. So it's nice to be able to like plan this out, and the story I think we have working is pretty cool so far.
Nice.
Yeah. And
Cool.
I think narrative, by the way, narrative is important in almost any kind of game, right? Mike and I had many conversations about this. Well, it's a hero collector, and it's really about creating these teams and building up your heroes, and equipping them and getting them high enough level so they could tackle bigger and bigger challenges. But to the context of that, right? The world that surrounds that is so important for players to really connect with the material, right? I always use Portal as an example. Portal could have been a game just you finish a level, you go to the next level. You click a button, it just takes you to the next level. Now you do the portal guns and then you go to the next level. But no, the geniuses behind that game said, hey, let's give this in context. Let's give it lore. Let's give it a narrative. Let's set it in a world that makes the character think and entertains them, and they're engaged in what's going on. There's a little bit of a mystery, like who am I? Or how am I here? Who's his voice talking to me the whole time? It's very funny. That really, in my opinion, that makes a puzzle game something truly unique, right? It elevates it and it makes it Portal. And now that's why everyone's, oh, I loved Portal. Well, I would bet more than half of the people who say I love Portal aren't talking about just the puzzles. They're talking about the characters. They're talking about the things that happen. They're talking about the things that they learn, the funny lines they hear. So I do think that narrative is important in almost any genre. And one of the things that we really wanted to dig into this is in a hero collector, you're going in, you're picking your guys, you're getting your team, they go and they face different waves of enemies and defeat bosses and such. But we really wanted to make the experience about the individual that's doing that, that's picking those characters and putting them in place, and sending them out to do these fights and building them and adding to them and raising them in level. And so immediately the question was, who is the player, right? Like, why is the player important? How is the player vital to the narrative? And then we started going from there. So the gods are the gods and heroes and monsters are the things you collect. The character of the game is you, the player. You are the one that's the super important character. All the cutscenes are aimed at you, the player. They're not talking about the characters that you're picking. Those are more like your champions, your heroes, your pantheon that you're forming. It's talking about you. And I think once we had that in mind, the story became really sort of much easier to develop, because we're always talking back to the player. You defeat a god, the god's talking to you, the player. You're about to fight somebody, they're challenging you. And then all the characters then react to you as well. So when you start picking your heroes, they understand that they are working with you, that they are going under the orders, the operation, the commands of you. So you have to be important in the story, and especially important in terms to people like Thor and Hercules and Zeus and Odin. You have to be, if not as more important than those gods. And that's sort of the approach that we took. And I think it's going to be a very successful one. I think players are going to be immediately engaged. They're going to love what they're doing. And they're going to love that the story is very much about them progressing through the narrative. So yeah, I'm looking forward to see how the fans react to that, because I do think it's the right choice. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and they're going to immediately feel like, it's almost like it's not a single player narrative driven game, right? It's not Kratos going through the world and everyone reacting through Kratos as far as the genre, but the feel is going to be very similar. It is if you were Kratos going through the world and all the Norse gods are reacting to you, right? Very much that's the same approach that we were taking with the story.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that's probably part of that background that we brought in, like that perspective we brought in from not being from this genre. Like the two observations we made pretty early were like, that we aligned on. I think the very first conversation we had was like, we want the players not to feel like they're just one of, a million. Like I want them to feel like they are driving the story, right? It's from their perspective. We are addressing them, because I think it's so easy to passively observe a story in a genre like this, and there's that real risk of, well, you're telling this really impactful story that always ends with, all right, guys, line up, work your way through, fight a boss, and then you're gonna do something completely different in the story, and now you're gonna do the same thing, and again, what's nice about the game loop, and what's kind of like what gets you hooked is that grind, and is that progression, and is that gameplay. But from a story, that's a real challenge, because it's like, well, how many times can you set up, all right, guys, we're gonna go to this place and work our way to the boss, so in a way you risk undercutting your own stakes by saying, like, yeah, we're trying to sell you that this is a really big story, and that the world is, all this big global, cosmic stuff is happening, and all you have to do is get in a line and fight these three guys. So I think that was one of the things we realized. Well, if it's less about the individual battles and who's on your team and your squad and doing all that, what if it's more about like the person who is in control and is doing this, and their role, and what these battles mean to something bigger, which is really cool. I think that's the thing that we've kind of started to build up, is like, how do we not just create a cool campaign story, but how do we, I think that's what we said too, is like, we want to develop an IP. We want to do world building. We don't just want to do storytelling. So our campaign and those scenes and that story is part of it, but the announced trailer was also part of it. And then the tutorial is also part of it. Things that come out later will also be a part of it. And they're all going to fit under the umbrella of this world, and it can be bigger than just any one campaign, which is what I thought was really cool, because sometimes it's just, hey, you have a campaign mode, and then everything else is, no shade, but it's pop-up ads and banners and, whatever random stuff that's going on all mashed together, and it's like, it feels just all over the place. Our goal was like, let's create a big enough IP and a big enough story that all this stuff can fit under it. We can explain the game systems in a way that fits within the world, and that I think is, all of the planning and all the work that's been happening. I think the first couple months of this year, we're now starting to execute on, when it comes to putting some lore and story behind all the stuff you interact with. And as a player, like, I love that. I love when it's deliberately done, and it's done with care, because I always look at it kind of like digging. Like, if I dig a little bit into your lore and there's stuff there for me, if I'm just very surface level, I just, I mute it, and I'm just looking at tooltips, and you're explaining to me what the Godforge is and how that relates to the world. That's cool. If I go a little bit deeper and there's stuff there too, like, oh, cool. So I think players will keep investing and keep going deeper and deeper into your lore and your world and your systems, as long as they keep finding more and more stuff. So we have the surface level, we have the lore, we have the game systems, and I think, there's just, we're trying to make sure that there's all aspects of the game. Story isn't getting in your way, but it's making it more immersive. Like, you really shouldn't find any corner that doesn't feel like it fits in with the greater conflict, the sides we're setting up, the story we're setting up. But then, hopefully we can, like I said, as I think Aaron and I, like, we could do a lot of story stuff with this. We could develop a lot of cool ideas. Like, there's so many interesting characters and stuff.
Yeah, there's all sorts of backstories to pull from, and history and all that. And Yuha, I wanted to let you jump in. I know you come from kind of the community side. What's been like the reaction since the trailer dropped? Any new craziness going on from that side of the world?
The trailer reaction was just like everything we expected and times 10. Like, it was insane. We got such good feedback from all across the globe. Like, all the socials are absolutely packed with praises, and people absolutely love the entire scene. They love the way it's building the world. They love like all the vocals. They love everything about it. Like, it couldn't have gone better. And like that just shows the level of quality we are putting out, that the talent of the people in the team, because again and again it shows that we got a lot of amazing talent in the team, and whenever somebody new comes up, they are also really good and they are always welcomed into the team. There's none of that like shunning people away. It's always like one big family, and that's really awesome to see. And
Yeah, I think Aaron nailed that. Like when I was coming over, because Aaron, especially, like we both come from very large places. And I think, you know, there's like, I think my perspective over the last couple of years is like I don't know that I ever try to join a project or join a company feeling like there's a guarantee that this is gonna work. This is gonna be a success. You know, like Aaron said, like you know, I've got multiple layoffs, multiple studio closures. He's got multiple games that have been shut down. I know people that worked on games for 5 or 6 years and then it's shut down. Like you gotta love the process. But I think that's a reality of it. But what I have arrived at is like the reason I've really enjoyed working with Fateless, and then to Aaron's point, good people want to work with good people, and they tend to find each other, and they want to bring a good people in. But it's really like I believe that the team here will do everything they possibly can to make the game successful, and that is listening to the audience, listening to the community, finding the right people, like pouring their hearts into it. And honestly, I think that's all you can really ask. Is like I'm not asking you to guarantee success, but I will put in everything I can when I know everybody around me is going to do everything they can to at least try.
A
You know what I
little
mean?
a little side question I would have from the perspective, I come from more like the gaming, esports type background compared to you guys. From your perspective, working on projects that ended up getting closed or canceled or whatever, was it obvious? Like, did you know in the back of your mind, a year or two ahead, things aren't going great. I need to kind of mentally prepare. This might get shut down. Or was it like just going great, and then one day boss says, sorry, this is getting canceled. Best of luck to you.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's both. I mean, it's been
yeah.
both. It's sometimes you can, sometimes it starts to become obvious, but sometimes it isn't. You're chugging along. There's great chemistry. You guys are developing some good things, but for whatever reason, right? Suits decide, you know what? We gotta make these numbers. And if your project is the one that they think is probably the most easily sacrificed, then they do it. I wanted to add something to what Mike said. Here's the other difference too with Fateless, by the way. And again, I've worked with many different companies, all very big companies, and a lot of them have all of them have very passionate people. But sometimes the people that are making the decisions, like the very top execs, are business people. They're not even really game fans. They're business people, and they're hired because they're business people, and they make business decisions. And one of the things that immediately became clear at Fateless is that the founders are fans. The founders are gamers. They love these games. They play these games. They know these games very well, and they're passionate about these games. And that I'm telling you, that is what the fans are noticing. That is what's making the difference. This is not a game made by a huge company that's pouring money into something, and all the decisions are being made by suits. This is a game by a very small, feisty, wonderful, talented group of people, but that are all fans, from the founders all the way down to whatever the latest intern is that's been hired. This is a game by fans for fans, and I think that passion definitely is infectious, and it definitely gets picked up on.
Yeah,
Fans will notice.
I want to add to what's a good point, Aaron. It is definitely a big factor with Fateless, and I come from like a background of streaming and doing YouTube and content and stuff from the gaming side of things. And I would have companies and investors, bring me in for a meeting to ask me questions about what to do to be successful and all that to relate to the gamers. And you wouldn't believe how little they know about their
Yeah.
game. It would
No, I
legitimately
would.
shock
We
me.
would. I was gonna say,
Like,
I think
I
we
would
would.
believe you.
I'm not. I mean, the viewers wouldn't believe it.
Yeah,
But like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
won't call out the specific game, but I was meeting with the high ups, like the multimillionaires, the people that make the decisions for the game. And one of the questions they asked me, they were like, "Should we change the price that we're charging to download the game? Do you think the gamers would be okay with that?" And I was like, you don't charge to download your game. It's free. And they're like, oh, our game, our app is free. I'm like, yeah, the game is free. And then you sell microtransactions in the game. And they were like, oh, okay. So they come to this meeting with me and they don't even know about their own app. They have no clue. And I was that really opened up my eyes. I was like, wow, like these decision makers, they don't know anything.
It's tough, man, because there's the side of that which is like you do need the business side. And everybody who's been making games their entire lives are not equipped or familiar with how to run a $1 billion company or $1 million company or what. I think for me, it usually just comes down to, are you bringing in experts? And I've said this many times. Like my first observation working with Fateless team, and I've said this on here. I think my first observation was they trust, like they know what they like, but they really trust the expertise of everybody else. Like they're like, yeah, like
Absolutely.
however we get there, I totally trust you guys, and that is important because I think, when it comes to, there's a business side of thing. And as the company gets larger, the business side gets more and more pushed, I think. And the focus is less and less on the day to day, the game, the patch, whatever. As long as creative has a voice in the room and then there's a value put on it and a trust put on it, it can still work. But I think to me, that is the biggest thing, especially when it comes to working with story in games. Like I said, I haven't worked on the MMOs where story is so integrated. I don't know that you could ever devalue story in an MMO. A lot of the stuff I've worked on story is marketing, and it is sometimes, hard to defend because it's like, well, what's the KPI on people loving an like a cinematic, Well, did it sell skins? Like, well, maybe, but it wasn't really like a commercial for a skin. I think that's where, if you understand and you look at it as part of like a greater player experience of, it just makes me love your brand. It makes me love you as a developer. I can see the effort. It makes me imagine the IP. It drives community, engagement. It makes me do fan art and cosplay. Like there's so much value, I think, to having a story and having an IP and having it resonate with people. But if you are just looking at it from like, all right, but how much money did that, that love of story bring in last year? It's so hard. So I really, it's like, the way it works is it's a mentality of like, how do we work it in a way that adds to value. But I do think like the business and creative side, because we're talking specifically about story on this one, it's like that's where it gets a little hard to defend for me. And I think from a marketing side, and one of the first things Simon and Sham and Dan said when I talked to him was like, we love story, we love lore, we want to have it be a big part of our game, we want it to be it. And I was like, all right, then I'm in, because that's honestly all I want. Is like, I want people who love the story and understand how much players can get into it if you give them something worth their time,
Yeah, the founders have been phenomenally supportive when it comes to narrative. Simon, Dan, and Sham have been so freaking amazing, and they trust us. Once we went in there and showed that we know what we're doing, they're like, "Oh, well then, great. Produce some great cutscenes. Come up with some great lore. Come up with some great characters." But that trust is vital, and that freedom is vital to success. Because I've been on teams where it's much more tightly controlled, and there is more mandates from on top, from coming down and saying, well, you have to do this and this and this and this, and those decisions are not always creative. Those decisions are business decisions, they're practical decisions, and you have to work around that. That's just part of that's how businesses run. But yeah, when you value narrative, and I think the cosplay example is a beautiful example of this. Fans get excited by the IP, right? People dress up like Luke Skywalker because they love Luke Skywalker. They get action figures of him because they love that character in those stories, and they love his story and his personality and who he interacts with and the things that's happened to him. And they want a lightsaber just like his. All of that is story. Every last bit of it is story. And so that is, I think, what is going to really create the best fans. When the fans love your characters, that you've made it. You've won. Of course, the game has to be entertaining and fun, and they have to keep coming back and back. But that when they start cosplaying as your characters, yeah, you've made it. You've arrived.
Yeah, I
And
think
that's
some
the goal.
people, I think some games, some teams, some people just do it better. And I think that's what, like I said, when we approached this, it was, there's a difference between building an IP and telling a story. And so you could just tell it, like we could just tell a story in the campaign mode, and it's a campaign story and it's totally isolated, and everything else is just, it's a game. It's here's how you play, here's the mechanics, here's the rewards, the items, here's the leveling, here's the stats, and it's like if you want story, go to the campaign. But yeah, I think the same way, like the IP is something that you want to be able to reach people outside of just the gameplay. And I think that's maybe another one of those points that gets lost between all the different parts of business and creative. And, when it comes to games is, you know, people love your game. It's like anything else. Like you love a movie, like every one of us, like everything I have is because I love this stuff and I want to be surrounded by it. I want to have a piece of it. And I think there's like a certain level of culture. I mean, like I hadn't played a lot of hero collectors, but it's the same thing. Like I get it. It's the same reason I collect everything else. It's because, man, that looks cool. I want to have it. I want to interact with it. I want to build a collection. Like, and that doesn't just stop at the game. So I think, yeah, that's what I said. I hope we get to do a lot more, like build out stories, do additional campaigns, do more stuff, because there's a lot of potential there. But it's not just because, I like stories and I want to make animation. It's because as players and as gamers, I mean, it's for some reason it feels like this secret sauce where it's like, no, you just have to have something that's really thought out so that people like have, like if people will meet you in the middle, like if you put in a ton of effort to defining something and really creating something that's deep, there's a lot of people who'll be like, all right, I'm willing to go really deep dive into your IP as long as I find value. And it's like that's the agreement, is like, listen, like I understand like the business side of it. It's a game. You have to buy stuff, you have to pay people, you need to keep the servers running. That's fine. Like I've never found gamers to be like, oh, why isn't everything in the world free? It's like everything else in life. No, it's
Well,
like everything
some
else. So
some customers
okay,
might wonder that.
some specific things like why am I paying for that? But in
Yeah.
general, like I'm not going to spend money on every game I play, but I'll spend money on the ones who I know are giving me a lot of value back for it. Whether that's like the gameplay itself, ideally it's all this stuff. It's the game, it's the quality, it's the content, it's the marketing, it's the community. Like that's where I'll invest, and I'll spend my time and
Oh,
my
yeah.
money because I know I'm going to get some of that
It's when
back.
players want to support you instead of feeling like they're forced to, for sure.
Yeah,
And
and I
Yes.
think for us, it's like we want to earn it. Like we're not just going to say,
oh, for sure.
come get, like we want to earn that time, and we want to create
Yep.
something and an experience and story that's worthy of your time, and then hopefully you'll spend a lot of time on Godforge.
Yeah. And Yuho, did you have any topics or questions or things you wanted to get in there? Do you think it'd be like a good question from the community perspective, or do you hear anything on Discord that people would be interested to know from Aaron or Mike or anything you want to discuss?
Yeah, for sure. One thing that comes up a lot is that there's a certain group of people that want us to stick true to the original all the way. Like there can't be any deviation. So how do you take that into account in our world building? Because of course you have to have that creative twist when suddenly Zeus is battling a dragon with Hercules. Like it doesn't necessarily make sense from the original text and the original mythology.
Yeah.
So how do you approach that, and how do you consider that some people might be like really passionate about the topic and want you to be as close to the original as possible?
Yeah, I went into it immediately thinking I must be true to the heart of the myth. I must be true to who this character is. But like you said, it's a video game, right? It's not a documentary, it's not a scholarly work. It's a video game. And we are taking these characters and putting them in positions where the myths never put them, right? So at that point, it's all extrapolation. To your point, Yuho, what do you do when Odin and Zeus have never actually met? How do they react? What do they say to each other? We know in general from the myths how Odin might feel or how Zeus might react, but other than that, it can go in a completely unexpected direction. So I want to be true to the heart of the myth. I want to be true to the heart of the character, but we absolutely need the freedom to create completely new situations, new scenarios, new takes on these characters. Because if you want to know about the character, there are so many wonderful books on mythology, right? You can spend so many years researching the various beautiful myths. And by the way, we need to include the Finnish myths. That's one of my favorite cycles of mythology. Honestly, are the Finnish myths. They were a huge inspiration for Tolkien as well. And I think I desperately want to bring them into Godforge, but I I I I we can't. I told myself we cannot say no, they didn't do this in the myth, so they wouldn't do this in the game. No, that absolutely will not work for what we're trying to do. But you also don't say, oh, Thor's a coward. Well, Thor's not a coward, and that would be a betrayal of the heart of that character. But you have no idea what happens when Thor suddenly sees Aphrodite for the first time. Does he fall in? Does he go, oh, who's that? Like, does he fall in love with Aphrodite? Is it a completely different experience? Or what does he think when he comes up against Perun, another lightning god? Do they like each other? Are they friends? Are they rivals? So all of this has to be new territory. So I can make this promise to the fans who are lovers of mythology. We will always try to be true to the heart of the myth and the character, but we will absolutely be creating and extrapolating new situation scenarios, developing new ideas for these characters, because that's going to make them fresh and interesting. If our Thor does only things that he did in the myths, that's not terribly interesting. But if our Thor is suddenly doing things that people are going, wait, what? What's Thor doing? Now we're intriguing players. Now they're interested. They want to find out, where's this going? Like I never thought Thor would be in this situation, sort of thing. So that's my take on it. I don't know, Micah, how you
Yeah, no,
how you approach it. Yeah,
100%. I think we said, like, respectfully, like I think we look at the myths as the circumstances that defined the character. But one of the first things we did, I think we were talking about the actual story behind the world of Godforge, is explain why and how these characters are actually together, all pulled together to begin with. So that was part of it, because we don't want it just to be like, here's a story for Thor and here's a story for Aphrodite, and but never should they mix. Like that's really the first thing we did. Was first thing the player's going to do is drop in, and there's all these random characters all together. Do the characters know each other? Like how did the characters come together? Like, all the questions that I would have. But that was really the point. Look, it's going to be to our benefit as a story, as a product, and as an IP, because really all I want is, like, man, how far could you take this machine, this story machine? And if you do it right with RIP, it's like, man, you could do it almost endlessly. Because, like I said, it's a yeah, I'm like I said, Hercules and Thor. I'm like, what would that look like? Would they be bros? Would they be at each other's throats? Would they, like, go off and have this crazy competition? Would they just go scam chicks? Like, what like what are these two guys gonna do? Like, and that's the fun part. Like, that's why I care about IPs. Is I'm like, oh, what's gonna happen? So I think that was the first thing we did. It was like, let's make sure there's a legit reason for why these gods and myths and heroes, and why they're all coming together, what kind of freedom that gives us. And let's just not brush it away. Like, let's not just make it, oh, just go with it. It's a game. Like, we say it's a game, but, like, because we want to do something cool, but we don't just brush that away. There's a reason why you're controlling these characters, why they're all together, and like a lot of the campaign story and a lot of the tutorial story, and it's to try to explain that part of it. So I think, as long as you understand why we're doing it, and then it's like, oh, and then you see the characters and you're respectfully doing it, then it becomes cool. Now what fun stuff can we do with that material now that it's all out there?
That was a great question, Yuho, and yeah, thanks for that perspective, guys. It's ironically the same thing from my perspective, working on the game design side of it in terms of building out kits for heroes. is I'm sitting there researching them, and I want to be true to their lore. Oh, this guy's associated with fire, but maybe we already have a bunch of people that are doing fire, and it's like, okay, how do I honor that without leaning too much into fire on this faction and having everybody place fire? So yeah, there is some liberty that needs to happen, but you do always want to honor the core. So I kind of agree with everything you guys said. So yeah, thanks for that, Yuho. And we are getting close to wrapping up, but Aaron, it's your first time here on the podcast. So I do like to get that question out there on, it can be either somebody that's confirmed or not in our game. Do you have a favorite, like, myth or legend that you just are the most passionate about working on, or someone that you're like, this person better be in our game and they better be awesome? Is there anybody that really stands out to you?
Well, I'll do something I probably shouldn't do. This is not for the story that we are currently working on, although I think the story we're currently working on is very, very cool. I want to see how many players can guess who the main bad guy is going to be, who the main antagonist is going to be, because I think you'll be surprised. But one of the things, going back to the Yuho's question about, how are these gods all interacting? One of the things I absolutely want to do, and you heard it here first, folks, there is a very active intention from the narrative director to have a story that focuses on all the gods of the underworld. So I've always loved the underworld and all mythologies and how fascinating it is, and a lover of horror, as I said. So I love the spooky and the creepy. I want to have a story, and if I have anything to say about it, we will work on this. A narrative that develops, that involves as many of the different underworld gods as possible, and I'll leave that as a teaser. Whether they are teaming up or they're fighting or they have some other scheme, we don't know. But I guarantee I will have a story that involves all the gods of the underworld.
Man,
And
that went from I probably shouldn't
Yeah.
say this to I
had
guarantee.
I had to do
Man.
it because it's one of those things. I mean, it's what a great thing to
I'm
do a
with you.
story on.
Let's do
What
it.
a great thing to do a story on, and how would these wonderful, dark, scary characters interact with each other, and for what reason? Why are they interacting with each other? So anyway, so there's a good tease. But I love the dark myths. I love again, characters of the underworld. I'm a big fan of as far as world mythology, Scandinavian myths. I was a very, very quick story. I was hired. I'm a Texan, seventh generation Texan, and a Norwegian company hired me to be the lead writer on a game about Norse mythology. So if that tells you how obsessive I am about Scandinavian mythology, yeah, Norwegians hired a Texan to be their lore guy about Norse mythology. So yeah, I love the Scandinavian myths, and like I told you, we're bringing in the Finnish mythology. By God,
So would the
we're
answer be like hell or something? Or
oh, you mean do I still have to pick a character?
yeah, come on, I'm not letting you off the hook that easy.
Okay, yeah, I know you're not, are you? I mean, sure, yeah. I actually think Hell is a fascinating character. And for those who have not seen it, it's a great series. It's called Twilight of the Gods. It's an animated show on Netflix, and it's superb. It's one of the best takes on the Norse myth that I've ever seen, and it does everything that Mike was saying we wanted ours to do. It's timely. It seems like something written today for a modern audience. It's got fantastic characters. It's mature. It's M for mature. It is not for kids. But it's one of the most amazing takes on Norse mythology that I have seen in a long, long time. Twilight of the Gods on Netflix. Yeah, it's a wonderful animated show. But sure, I guess if I have to pick a mythological figure, sure, I'll pick Hell. I'll pick Hell.
Can't believe I guessed it right out the gate. There we go. Hey guys, this has been amazing. Yuho and Mike and Aaron, it's been a blast. Thanks for joining us, and we will have all the links that you need down below if you would like to hop in Discord and talk about things like the lore and the Godforge trailer that has launched recently. We'll have all of that for you down below, and we will see you soon in the next Fateless podcast episode. Cheers.